Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. Uh, it's good to be back on this beautiful Monday night. It's half past the hour of 11 p.m. To be exact, 34 minutes past the hour. And yeah, we are back to discuss the latest from sport. We did. We, Hi, LFC. How are you doing, my brother? We didn't do the morning broadcast. I had to go to hospital, so yeah. Anyways, I'm not in the best of shape, uh, but still, I thought I should hop on here and we get a few things discussed here and there, what depending on what has transpired over the course of the weekend, what's going on. There's a Monday night football game that's between Everton and West Ham United, and it's 1-1 at the moment, with Michael Keane having scored to give Everton the lead, while Gerard Bowen scored to restore parity. That's for the visitors. Remember Nottingham Forest. Remember West Ham United under the charges of a new manager. That's can't stay, need to pray before bed. Sorry, it's all right. Thank you for chipping in. I remember West Ham United uh, under the charges of a new manager in Nuno Espirito Santo, who took over the role after the sacking of Graham Potter. Now, Graham Potter had a difficult start to the season, and then when you did things back further to last season, during from his point of appointment, things have not been great. I mean, which begs the question: why are Manchester United not taking the same course of direction? I would know for a fact that Nottingham Forest, who are currently struggling, did not need to make that managerial change, but maybe out of personal egos and stuff like that, the club owner, that's Evangelos Marinakis, decided to make changes that are yet to bear any fruit in regards to the direction that he would have hoped they would take. They are still winless, I think, in about 5 games. That's for Andy Postecoglou ever since he took charge of the Premier League side, and yet on the other side, um, excuse me, uh, and yet on the other side, you would think that the intention was to see some immediate changes. Of course, they've even under Nuno Espirito Santo, they had suffered some humiliating defeats. But that all notwithstanding, we know what he had done at the club, guiding them to that kind of high seventh place finish. As we speak, they are 17th on the Premier League clock after 6 games with only 5 points, uh, 3 losses and 2 draws. Now, of course, you would say that Ange Postecoglou hasn't been in charge for a long time, never had preseason with the team, and so far things are not looking positive for him. Things are not looking positive for him. And tonight we'll be discussing Manchester United, and the reason for that is uh, is what we did evidence over the course of the weekend, that their victory against Chelsea was nothing short of a mere smokescreen, and that they would soon lapse back into the Manchester United that we've seen over the last many months. In as far as Ruben Amorim has been charged, they failed to win back-to-back Premier League games. They they can only manage to win a single Premier League game in a month, literally. When you look, he's been in charge of the club for about 34 games. They've only managed to get 33 points. Now, for Manchester United manager, that's way below average. We are talking about a team that is literally one of the holy grails of English football, that embodies what English football is all about. We know that with Manchester United over the years, they've been a cornerstone to whatever England get to do with the national team. We know that for a fact. I think Manchester United and Liverpool have always been those teams where majority of the players that featured for the English national team would play. Now, recent times notwithstanding, with the emergence of teams like Chelsea and Manchester City, I say Chelsea in particular to relate back to the period when Jose Mourinho comes in and he changes their fortunes. Of course, the entire length of period when Romano Abramovich was the owner of the club and things like that. So, but when you go back in back in time, you'll find that, but even still during that same period, you could see that Liverpool and Manchester United were largely the cornerstone of what would become of the England national team. You go and pick on players like Rio Ferdinand, Wayne Macaroni, those were all Manchester United players. Paul Scholes, featuring the England national team. So now unfortunately is that Liverpool also had their own spell where they weren't at their very best. That we know for a fact. But the point I'm trying to drive home or to make is that Manchester United is no less a gigantic team. It's a very, very big team, comes with huge responsibility. And it's the kind of role, I do not know if it only happens to me, but every time I'm taking a leap forward, there's a part of me that is afraid to falter, afraid to flounder. And Manchester United management role kind of feels that for any team you come from to come into Manchester United, it's going to be it's almost always going to be an upgrade. In a sense, even when Jose Mourinho took over at Manchester United, he knew that it was an upgrade from the Chelsea that he had managed. Of course, maybe in comparison previously, in terms of his own CV, you could put it in the same basket with Real Madrid that he had managed between 20, was it 2010 and 2013, around that period. So that's the kind of team that Manchester United are. But when you look at that report card from Ruben Amorim, it's not good. It's not good. The manner in which they concede goals, the manner in which they play. Gary Neville was saying, I know one would argue this is typical of Gary Neville, but he says he senses the kind of feel that players are not trusting or are no longer believing in this kind of system. The manager is trying to make them play. When you look at some of his substitutions as a manager, they are oftentimes questionable. I mean, it's almost a given that when you can bet your hand on it, that in every given game, he will make a substitution of a centre back. Then also, you bring in Mason Mount, and everybody's thinking you want to throw bodies up front, you want your team to be very, very attacking and going forward, and then he's playing at the left wing. And you're wondering to yourself, what on God's screen earth is he doing? Now, the question we do pose today is that are Manchester United too afraid to act? Now, I'm increasingly getting that feeling that they are afraid to act. They've gotten so many things wrong so many times that it feels that uh, them cutting their ties with Ruben Amorim at this stage would feel like the same old story, would be an indictment on themselves to say, yeah, we made another wrong decision, and now let's go out and make a new decision. Now, you could feel that way. Now, a poll, allow me rely on this poll, even though it's not from the most reliable sources. I get the feeling it did come from Sky Sports. 46% of Manchester United fans still think Ruben Amorim should be given a little bit of more time, while about 54% think he should be let go. Just now says, I think the issue is a mentality problem. Every manager that comes in mentions are rebuilding the team to buy themselves time. I think this is wrong. These are professionals with an average of the age of 27. Now, okay, we will speak to that in a bit, but thank you so much just now for that kind of submission. So the reason as to why I do not want you to take that poll by Sky Sport for gospel truth is that you never know. Even Liverpool fans could have contributed to that, or even Arsenal fans, or for rival fans who think, yeah, the more United suffers, the more banter we get, and the more we get to laugh at them and things like that. So but anyways, it still shows that he should be exiting. Now, just now mentions the idea of mentality. Now, is it a mentality question? I'm not, I wouldn't say it, I would say it could be, but it's not the entirety of the story. Because you see, when a new manager comes into a club, usually you have what is oftentimes dubbed in the media as the new manager bounce. And that's when players sort of are given a clean slate that given what you've previously done or not done, you have a new set of eyes looking at you that are willing to give you a chance. And if you're in that Manchester United dressing room at the time of his coming in, those were players like Marcus Rashford, uh, Jadon Sancho. Of course, he had had his rift with Eric Ten Hag, but every single Manchester United player within that dressing room was literally having a clean slate. That you have a new manager, Ruben Amorim, who is going to try and play a new system that may require you to play in a different position or anything, or take on a different role. All that notwithstanding, can somebody stand on their two legs and tell us that? And tell us when Manchester United had that feel of a new manager bounce? It never happened for them. The only good thing they had going for them was their run in the UEFA Europa League. Of course, it also came with its own problems. For example, in the quarterfinals, I thought they conceded one too many goals because eventually they did advance on 7-6 aggregate. So, which was a bit of a scare in itself. And then the game against Athletic Bilbao, we know that at San Mamés, Bilbao got a red card. I think for Danny Vivian, got sent off, and Bilbao got hammered 3-0. They came to Old Trafford, they led by a goal to nil, and then United came from behind, and I think Mason Mount possibly scored a double in that one. They looked good until they reached the final, and then they choked. Now, that final, was it still a mentality issue? No, I do not want to think so. Now, again, like I've said, I'm starting to wonder whether Manchester United are afraid of acting because they know that the top brass have gotten so many decisions wrong. We go back to 2013, and I'm not saying that that's how far back their wrong decisions go back, but I'm just giving you context or history. But this manager went into the Europa League final saying winning it would not matter. That was sad. Exactly the manager's mentality. You're in Manchester United. Every competition you play in, you are there to compete to win it. You're not there to participate. And he was speaking to that in the context of whether it would salvage their season. For me, I'm always of the idea, pick whatever piece of silverware that you can pick on, because that gives you a certain belief, that gives you a certain momentum, and to believe that you can go for bigger things. One of the reasons as to why Arsenal, and allow me to use the example of Arsenal, that Mikel Arteta is in his season, his sixth season, of course, being the full seasons being five, you make the argument for him that when he had just walked through that door, he went on and won the FA Cup in his first half season, beating Chelsea by 2-1, I think, in the final, or 2-0. And then you look back subsequently winning the Community Shield when they beat up against Manchester City. Now, while you may not count the Community Shield as a trophy in itself for the ceremonial grounds it bears, you cannot discount the factor of how big leverage that FA Cup gave him, in terms of winning. Today, the small belief or glimmer of hope that some Arsenal fans carry in their hearts that Mikel Arteta is capable of guiding them to a major trophy is predominantly hinged upon that fact that they were able to win an FA Cup with him. Now, of course, that was back in 2020. We're at the tail end of 2025, but you can see what that means. In the wake of Brighton beating up against Chelsea by 3-1, there have been questions raised over Enzo Maresca. But from what we are getting from insiders is that Chelsea are in no rush to act. They still believe in Enzo Maresca. They think he's very, very integral to this project, and that he will take it forward. Personally, I'm not in doubt of the abilities of Enzo Maresca. My only reservation is that sometimes like many modern managers, or like a few other modern managers, he tends to overthink games and think as teams. More or less in a Pep Guardiola kind of style. For example, the idea of wanting to play Richard James in midfield, while sometimes he's looked good there, on other occasions he's not. Particularly, for example, in the final against PSG in the FIFA Club World Cup, Richard James in that midfield looked good, but in other games it hasn't happened. So they lost, and part of what convinces Chelsea is that they're talking about a manager who last season guided them to the triumph of the UEFA Conference League. Now, we can sit here and debate its magnitude and weight in comparison to other competitions. All that notwithstanding, it is a piece of swallowware that he won. Then he went to the FIFA Club World Cup, the new inaugural edition of the expanded format, and he won that. So those are two trophies on the bank. Now, that is enough to take him through and the entirety of this season, regardless if they underperform themselves by measure of what they were able to do last season. We know that in the UEFA Champions League, they have not had a good start to the campaign. So, for example, when you look at Chelsea, they've only won one fixture in the last, I think, probably 6 games, and that was against Lincoln City in the EFL Cup at the third round, which game they won by 2-1. But in between there, they've lost to Manchester United, they've lost to Bayern Munich, they've lost to Brentford. Those are 3 games. Then they drew against Brentford, and then the other results was I think there was another draw in there. So you could see that things have not been off to a sweet start for Enzo Maresca. But all that notwithstanding, there is trust that he is capable, because he's shown them that he is capable of sort of being just that, of guiding them into winning things. He gives there's something you watch about Chelsea, and you have a bit of hope that look here, there's something to sort of to be positive about this Chelsea side, and yet on the other side, or on the flip side, for Manchester United, you cannot say the same about them. You cannot say the same about them. So when you highlight that the manager is going into a European Cup final and he thinks that that winning it doesn't matter, that's a huge problem. It matters. Why? Because it's another piece of silverware. It mattered. Why? Because it made qualification through the UEFA Champions League. It mattered. Why? Because that should be giving you bragging rights. It's the it's the UEFA Europa League. And look at where Tottenham are right now, or look at where they were. So you look at that set of 3 those sorts of results, and it's not good for Chelsea. Now, in comparison, we're looking at Manchester United, who again they've only won 2 games this season out of the 6 that they played. They've lost 3 against Arsenal, Manchester City, and Brentford, and drawn 1. Now, when you look at those numbers, that they've won 2, drawn 1, and they lost 3, figuratively speaking, it wouldn't be the worst kind of performance one would think of. But again, we're talking about Manchester United. If you're Sunderland and you have that podcast, good. If you're Brighton, you Bournemouth, West Ham, Everton, Aston Villa, that's okay. But it is Manchester United. Now, because they've fallen far off in the last couple of years, we have to take the bitter pill and say, on another day, that kind of start to the season, where you have 2 victories, a draw, and 3 losses in the start of the season, wouldn't be the worst of report cards. You've got to look at the opponents. Now, out of all those games, and I said this in the preview to leading up to that game against Brentford, that one, they needed not to lose, and my personal prediction had been a 1-1 draw for them, but they went there and got battered by Brentford. Brentford, who are under manager who is only managed 7 games of professional football, 6 in the Premier League now, and then 1 in the EFL Cup. Remember, they knocked out Aston Villa. in the third round of the EFL Cup, you know, and then you get battered by him. Now, of course, in the game itself, there was a controversial decision, which I thought should have been a red card for denying the clear and obvious goal scoring opportunity for Brian Mbomo's tag or pull that then leads to a penalty that Bruno Fernandes misses. But again, that notwithstanding, when you get that kind of opportunity of a penalty, take it away. Now, it's easier said than done, right? Because, oftentimes when a player misses a penalty, we are quick to blame them as opposed to giving credit to a goalkeeper in Komen Keller. I mean, we've watched Bruno Fernandes take so many penalties, but that was ugly. That was, for every argument's sake, not one of his better penalties. Never in a million years. So, but I keep saying, United shouldn't need Brentford to be reduced to 10 men for them to have a go at it, for them to be able to get a result there, at the GTEC Stadium. So in the aftermath of a game against Chelsea, where you've won under very difficult circumstances, because it's Chelsea, even though they were down to 10 men very early into the game, and eventually Manchester United got themselves equally reduced. When you have that belief, that momentum that takes you from the Chelsea game into Brentford, if you came from a Chelsea game and you are facing Manchester City or Arsenal, Liverpool, or Tottenham Hotspurs, I would sort of say, okay, understandable. But from Chelsea to Brentford, and then you get better. You've had a whole week's preparation. Now, for those of you that have just yourselves into watching my season-long predictions, I did put Manchester United 7, even above Tottenham Hotspurs. And part of my argument was that because they're not going to have European football, a lot of times they're going to play one game, go and have themselves well rested, and review their actions, what they've done right and what they've not done right, get to correct things. The manager is going to get a lot of time with his players without the idea of without the sort of hindrances or the challenges of having to analyze the next game, which would be coming in every 2 days, So them being out of Europe, I thought with the kind of squad that they have, you thought to yourself, yeah, they're going to be able to put some good results on the board. But it's not yet happened. Now, if you're a Manchester United fan out there, do let me know. What is it about your team that you look at and say, yeah, this is still positive? It's not there. Now, when you look at their squad on paper, ugly, I would argue that it's one of the best squads that are easy in the Premier League. Not in the top 3 or anything, but it's one of the best. Look at that front line. Matthias Cunha, Bani Bomo. Those two combined had 35 Premier League goals last season. This season, they only have what? Cunha hasn't scored any. Bani Bomo has scored what? 1 or 2? Benjamin Sesko scored all over the weekend. You look at Bruno Fernandes. Of course, idea of him being played in that number 8 role is an argument I've made for thousands of times. It's not going to work. Why? He's used to this kind of fluid role where he gets to roam around the pitch anywhere and everywhere. Now, when you're in number 8, while the role in its very nature commands you to be a box-to-box kind of player, Bruno Fernandes is not that type of player. He isn't. And I saw a lot of Manchester United fans giving him stick. And it's not the first time we've made this argument before, and allow me make it. I thought turning down £100 million for Bruno Fernandes from Al Hilal was a mistake, because they could have used that money to go and get themselves a number 8. But anyways, all that notwithstanding, like I said on paper, they arguably have one of the best squads. Maybe the goalkeeping position, you have some questions there, but they just spent what? 18 million euros plus on Sene Lomat from Royal Antwerp. You still have Luke Shaw. Harry Maguire costs about what? 80 million pounds plus. You have List. Okay, Sandro Martinez is out injured. You have Matthias Delit. You have Lenny Yoro. Players you bought expensively. Luke Shaw is still in there. Nusa Mazarui. Aiden Heaven. Patrick Dogu. That's a good setup. Are they the best No, they're not the best of defenders, but they're good, really, really good. You come to that midfield and think to yourself, Panel Ugate, Casemiro, Kobe Mainu, and you're thinking to yourself, can the manager do more to get the better out of these players? We're talking about a Kobe Mainu kind of player who, in the Euros 2024, was one of England's star performers. And yet, right now, the world wants us to believe that he is not good enough. I kid you not, and this is my personal opinion, that that same squad, that same Manchester United squad, and a different manager. The example I would give of Andoni Iraola from AFC Bournemouth or Oliver Glasson at Crystal Palace, I have a feeling would perform 5 times better than how Ruben Amorim is getting them to perform. Look at the example of Bournemouth. They lost many of their crucial players, Dango Ouattara notwithstanding, Ilya Zabaji, Dean Howson, that's their backline. Literally the heartbeat of their centre back. They lost Milos Kakez. The goalkeeper was Kepa Arrizabalaga on loan from Chelsea. He since left the club. But look at them. They are one of the top sides in the Premier League. Yes, they shared the spoils over the weekend in a 1-all draw, I think, with Leeds. But they are sixth on that Premier League log with 11 points. That's 4 points ahead of Manchester United. Now, 4 points in themselves are not too many. In any case, Manchester United will argue they are only, 5 points off. Is it 5? Sorry, about 6 points off a second-placed Arsenal. You would argue that. That's not too many points. And the beauty of the Premier League of football in nature is that you just need to go on a winning streak. Win yourselves 3, 5, 6 consecutive games, and then suddenly the table will change in your favor. So the point disparity in itself is not much, but by the measure of United's standards, in terms of historical context, in terms of caliber and size of the club, they should be doing better than that. So I have this sense or this feeling that the top brass at the club have gotten it so wrong so many times that they are now afraid to act. They're saying, oh, let's sort of live with our bad decisions and try to keep defending them. Because that kind of record, 33 points in 34 games in the league, at any other big team, is what gets you sacked. Even smaller teams have done that. They would get you packing. Imagine if Ruben Amorim was at Bayern Munich, at Barcelona, at Real Madrid, at PSG. Not that PSG is the biggest of clubs. Hell, if he was at Liverpool. I mean, look at Graham Potter. He was sacked prior to their game tonight against Everton. He was sacked, and that game, by the way, has finished in a 1-all draw. That's a huge point. It's a very, very valuable point for West Ham United. Of course, they are 19th on the Premier League club with only 4 points. And unfortunately for them, or fortunately, depending on which way you slice it, their next game will be up against Arsenal. You know, that's next Saturday. But so they've gone through this iteration, and I was saying earlier on, ever since 2013, David Moyes comes in. They think it's not working. They sack him. They bring in Louis van Gaal. He takes charge of the team for about 2 seasons. They feel it's not working out. They show him the exit. They bring in Jose Mourinho at 1.5 seasons in, I think. They show him the exit. They bring in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, 2.5 years possibly. They show him the exit. They bring in, they think it's not working. They bring in Erik ten Hag. 2 years and a couple of months in, he's shown the exit. They bring in Ruben Amorim, almost 1 year in, and it's shambles. It's simply gone from bad to worse. Now, I kid you not, if you put this kind of vote to Manchester United fans, out of the managers they've had, David Moyes, Louis van Gaal, Jose Mourinho, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and Ruben Amorim, sorry, Eric Ten Hag and Ole Gunnar sorry, and Ruben Amorim. The interims notwithstanding, and by the interims I mean the likes of Ryan Giggs and Ralph Rangnick. If you put that choice to them, that who of those managers would they rather have in place? I guarantee you it's not going to be Ruben Amorim that wins that vote. Chances are, and I say this without fear for contradiction, that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer could possibly win that vote. Ruud van Nistelrooy among the interims that are not mentioned, but Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wins that vote, possibly. Maybe Jose Mourinho. Hell, there are Manchester United fans who wish that Eric Ten Hag would still be in charge because they know that while it wasn't good enough with him, it wouldn't have gotten this bad with him, you know. And yet, it is. As we speak, Manchester United are 14th on the Premier League summit, sorry, on the Premier League log, with 7 points, 2 wins, 1 draw, 3 losses. Like I say, when you speak about it in that way, you would think it's not the end of the world, not the worst of results for a report card, but it's Manchester United we're talking about. Just imagine if the Pope failed to preside over Mass. Wouldn't that be scandalous? Why? Because he's the Pope. He's expected to know better than any other priest, than any other bishop or cardinal. So, Manchester United has that caliber of team that they are expected to be better, that they are expected to be bigger, and they need to show that. But the next game is against Sunderland before we go for the international break. And then I think after the international break, you'll have a game against Liverpool, and I do not know who comes up next. So you look at it and think to yourself, should we sack him if he loses against Sunderland? What if he wins? Does that mean everything is now for the better? You're not yet convinced so. But we will wait and see how it pans out. But I'm sure there must be voices whispering within the echelons of the Manchester United hierarchy saying we need to get rid of this guy. But possibly one of the power brokers, or if not the utmost high figure in Jim Ratcliffe, are still fond of Ruben Amorim, not for the job he's done, but for the belief that they have that this will all work out, that they have to win that this other sort of storm. I was watching, I think it was Tim Sherwood, was saying he expects Manchester United to stick with Ruben Amorim until the end of the season. Now, if the results continue to go the way they are going, I do not think he does make it to the end of the season, unless something changes. And what's going to change? That's a big question. So, all I want to hear are your thoughts, whether you're a Manchester United fan, football enthusiast, whatever it is that you are. What do you think needs to be done at Manchester United? Maybe the power brokers are looking around and saying, okay, if we've gotten wrong, if we've gotten it wrong with Ruben Amorim, then who is the next guy that comes in? And this time around, we must get it right, or at least half right compared to Amorim. That's a very, very big question to ask. I'm sure that many managers that are watching that Manchester United side and are thinking, I think I could do certain things or better things with that team. That maybe if I were in charge of that team, I should be able to get them doing this. Of course, as fans, or look at it in the context of when you're a manager, let's say you're out of a job, or even if you have another job, and you're watching a certain team play, and you're thinking, oh, they need to do this the right way. They're not doing that right. So I'm sure there's so many managers that would fancy that Manchester United, that would fancy taking on that Manchester United job. Not because the club are in a good shape or space, but because Manchester United is a big club. And there have been reports linking them with the potential move for Xavi Hernandez. We know he's out of work ever since being shown the exit at Barcelona. Apparently, Sir Jim Ratcliffe is very fond of Gary Southgate. I I think he's one of those kind of appointments that if they were to be made, I'd wait to be proven wrong, to be sold that he is capable of redeeming this Manchester United side. However, I have also the feeling or the conviction that he will do better than Ruben Amorim. For example, I look at that Man United side and I think to myself, what if the manager woke up one day and decided to tweak just one simple thing? Play with the back four, go with the 4-3-3. Simple as that. Now, again with the back four, you can still play within that very system, which is a 3-4-2-1 kind of system. And how is that achievable? Is that, for example, you tell yourselves that when we are in offense, it's a back three and one of our players is inverted. Or we are going to use one wing to have the overlapping, one of the fullbacks overlapping constantly. And then, you play your midfield, your two number 10s as supposed wingers, Mbomo to the right, Matthias Cunha to the left, and Sesko as the target man. Then in the mid, those three, you have Kobe Maino with, I think, maybe Casemiro, Manuel Ugarte, and ahead of them is Bruno Fernandes. I think that would work out much different. I think that would be a better setup. But well, he says the system is not the problem, and I do agree the system is not the problem, but it is part of the problem, because if it's not working, then you cannot convince us it's not the problem. Is he telling us the system is not the problem, that the players are? So anyways, guys, your thoughts on Manchester United. But for me, I'll leave it to you. If they lose against Sunderland, excuse me, if they lose against Sunderland, should he be shown the exit during the international break, or should they wait? Now, I've also had reports that apparently Manchester United want to wait to sack before sacking Ruben Amorim at least until November, post-Breyer or December, when he's fully made a year into the role, because then that would save them some bit of money in terms of compensation if you were to be sacked. Now, while the argument in itself would hold water, how it depends on how deep Man United feel that they are willing to sink before that can happen. Then the other thing, we know they've invested in him as a manager, but at least they're yet to go all in. It's not like every single player that they bought was cut out for him. I mean, go back last season, and Musa Mazorui, Matas Delic, Manuel Ugarte, and Lenio, those are all buys from the previous summer. The kind of buys that you're not just going to wake up and get rid of. So yeah, you ought to think about all that and all those pieces. But for me, I'll leave the debate to you to let me know what you think Man United should be doing. But in terms of credibility amongst the Manchester United fans, Ruben Amorim is grown out of favor for many. For many, he's living on a very thin thread. He's surviving by a whisker. So we will wait and see. And I also feel that he needs to change his approach on the way he speaks about the difficulties of the job. This whole idea of telling people that they should change the man, it's not the system, or you won't take a pay if you are sacked today or fired today. Not good. Anyways, now that match day 6 has been finally complete, we know there were surprise results over the weekend. Liverpool getting beat by Crystal Palace, hands down by 2-1. Of course, some bit of officiating controversies in there, but Liverpool again being overdone. Florian Wirtz was played out to the left flank, sacrificing Cody Gakpo. Of course, for me, Crystal Palace is one of those teams that is always stubborn against Liverpool. I know they are unbeaten. I think in the last 18 Premier League games, dating to if you date things back to last season. So they're a very, very good side and a very good manager in Oliver Glasner. And so far, it's really working out well for him. And guess what? He plays a similar system like Ruben Amorim. But you can see the grit in those Crystal Palace players as compared to those Manchester United players, you know. So yeah, but Liverpool have their own things to work out on, particularly, and I did say this during preseason or all to the build-up into this season, that while everyone, we all look at them as title favorites, there are things in that squad that that can be improved. And the defense is one of those. Unfortunately for them, they were unable to get Marquez at on the deadline day because he ended up staying at Crystal Palace and he's remained a royal servant, even though he's adamant he won't be renewing his contract with the club. So, but anyways, all that notwithstanding, I feel that Oliver Glasner is doing a very, very amazing job at Crystal Palace. Of course, when you think that UEFA Europe Conference League football is going to get underway and it will sort of, they may sort of struggle to find the perfect balance. So far, things look good for him. For Liverpool, I mean, it's only one loss in 6, not the most alarming report card. But if you look at the performance and you assess Liverpool's performance, then I'm sure you'll be worried about for Liverpool, given how shambolic they were. Yes, they were dominant on the ball, but it never counted much. Then Arsenal, literally had the best game of the season in how they played. They played with a handbrake off, very, very attacking, 20 attempts on goal, forced Nick Pope into 3 magnificent saves, which you would expect of a goalkeeper like Nick Pope. In any case, you also look at that Liverpool game and think to yourself, if it hadn't been for Alson Ramsey-Becker, they could have conceded as many as 5 or more. So yeah, Nick Pope had a tremendous game. That header from Julian Timber, he had no right saving that. The 2 shots from Ebelechi Eze, I mean, he did really, really well. And if Arsenal had not won that game for Declan Rice to win my Man of the Match award, I think Nick Pope would have walked away with it for the saves that he had managed to make in that game. So Arsenal managed to snatch it late through a header from Gabriel Magalhaes, who scored the winning goal, and they walked away with all 3 important points. Mikel Merino, a second half substitute, had scored in the 84th minute to restore parity to cancel out Newcastle's goal that had been scored by Nick Wolfmada in the opening stanza against the run of play, I think around the 34th minute. But Arsenal were really put on a very, very dominant performance. That midfield, Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi with ability is ahead of them. I thought was very, very positive, was quite a peak. Thought they played really well. Martin Zubimendi and Declan Rice are sort of slowly by slowly growing into this understanding that when I go forward, you stay behind. When we go forward, I stay behind. And it worked out well. You could see that I think around the 80-something minutes, when Mikel Arteta decides to bring on his captain, Martin Odegaard, he swaps him for Martin Zubimendi. And Martin Odegaard did not come to play deep. He was always going to be on the front foot. So, and then that meant Declan Rice goes into number 6, and then you had 2 attacking midfielders because Ebelechi Eze had been left on the turf. You still had Gabriel Martinelli on the other side, and yeah, they were literally going in for all of it. And I remember at the 90th minute mark, before the 4th official gets to put up the board to show what amount of time was added in, which was 8 minutes, Mikel Arteta inquires from the official of how many minutes, and he literally basically signals his team that we have 8 minutes to get the job done. Let's go for it. And while going for it, put them at huge risk at the back because he had withdrawn Ricardo Calafiori for a forward player or a midfield player, and then they sort of played in a bit of a back three, and then he brings on Miles Lewis Kelly at the tail end of it. But you could see how he signals to the team that let's go for it, and indeed they went for it. They forced Newcastle, they pinned Newcastle in, and they got their reward. So it's a game where you could say that Arsenal took risks and got rewarded, you know. So yeah, brilliant game of football. It had its riffraffs. It had some shambolic decision makings. For example, they denied penalty for Victor Gyökeres. For me, that's a penalty all day long. I don't care whether Nick Pope gets a touch on the ball or not. The mere fact that his knee impedes Victor Gyökeres from going ahead, because him tapping on that ball does not significantly even put it away to suggest that Victor Gyökeres would have lost his goal scoring sort of opportunity. You know, he could have still gone around him and scored in an empty net. So, anyways, because Arsenal won, the decision in itself won't be discussed that much. But yeah, I thought it was a good game. The referee could have made better decisions. On the penalty, he made the right decision. It's VAR that interfered when they shouldn't have. So yeah, positive stuff. Chelsea, don't worry, really. Meanwhile, Chelsea, I think, have Liverpool to play next weekend. I mean, that's an incredible game to look forward to. Yes, on Saturday, 7:30 p.m. They will be up against, Liverpool. So another brilliant opportunity for the two sides to meet. Chelsea have their struggles. They've received 2 red cards in 2 Premier League fixtures, back-to-back fixtures. So not pretty, not pretty. And we know that Chelsea beat up against Liverpool by 3-1 in May last year at Stamford Bridge. But at that point, Liverpool had already been confirmed champions, so they literally did have much to play for. But we know that Stamford Bridge is a place they've not won in the last 3 visits, and as far as the Premier League is concerned. So there's something, maybe we should be geared up for that one and see how it goes down. You know, I'm sure if they were to draw and then Arsenal win, possibly were to win, it would take them to the summit of the league on a better goal difference. Or if just were to beat Liverpool and Liverpool lose, and Arsenal win, or if Crystal Palace were to win their next game, and then Arsenal and Liverpool drop points, it would take them to 15 points. Of course, in point tally with Liverpool at the summit of the Premier League. So let's just wait and see. But Crystal Palace will have their trip away to Everton in the next Premier League outing. So yeah. Anyways, guys, that's the gist of it. Allow me let you be. Like I said, the game between Everton and West Ham United concluded in a 1-1 draw. Michael Keane and Gerard Bowen were the goal scorers in that game. Everton remained 9 with 8 points, while West Ham are 19th. So yeah, maybe briefly the other results are from the Italian Serie A. There were some games that were played today or yesterday. That's Parma beat up against Torino by 2-1, while Lazio beat up against Genoa by 3-0. Then Al Hilal beat up against Nasa Kwashi in the Saudi Pro in the FC Champions League Elite West, and that's in Asia. But anyways, tomorrow the UEFA Champions League does get underway, so do not miss out on that action. Some big games to come your way, particularly maybe, let me see, Liverpool Galatasaray, huge game. Chelsea at home against Benfica. Real Madrid will be away to Almaty. So Real Madrid need to overcome their weekend disappointments after they got thrashed 5-2 in the Madrid derby. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure doing this with you. Allow me go relax, given my health situation. Thank you so much just now, and LFC for chipping in with those invaluable comments. And I'll see you guys next time. Stay blessed and bye-bye.